She's not even useful, someone whispered, and though the hallway was bustling with children's laughter and the shrill squeak of sneakers on polished floors, the words cut through like broken glass. Eleanor stood just behind the double doors of the library, arms full of returned books, and paused. Her fingers tightened around the covers. She recognized the voice. It was Michelle Lockhart, the third-grade assistant, young, sharp-tongued, and always just a little too loud when she thought she was being clever. Seriously, why is she even here? She moves like a tortoise and scares the kids with that wrinkly, silent stare. I had one of my boys ask me if she was a ghost. The other woman laughed, nervous, guilty. Michelle, stop. No, but really, Michelle went on, sipping iced coffee through a pink straw. Every damn Tuesday and Thursday she comes with that ancient tote bag like she's still doing groceries in the 80s, just haunts the library and sits there breathing like Darth Vader. No offense, but it's creepy. No offense, Eleanor whispered aloud under her breath. Her voice trembled but didn't break. She pushed the door open, just loud enough that the two women flinched and turned. She didn't look at them. She walked past, silent as always, and gently laid the books onto the check-in counter. The air in the room seemed to stretch like pulled thread. She could feel their eyes on her back, feel the silence that suddenly felt too thick for this small, elementary school library. Outside the window, children ran beneath the golden leaves of a Colorado autumn. Eleanor allowed herself a long breath, slow and practiced. She picked up her clipboard and turned toward the reading nook, where two second-grade boys were flipping through a picture book about volcanoes, whispering like conspirators. Their faces lit up when they saw her. "Miss Eleanor," one of them said, jumping up. "We found the part with lava." She smiled, just barely, the corners of her mouth lifting like a secret only she could share. "Then we'd better make sure you know what to do if you ever see a real one." The boy gasped. "Wait, do you know what to do?" Eleanor knelt slowly, her knees creaking like old floorboards. "Let me tell you a secret," she said, and the boys leaned in. "Sometimes the only way to survive something big is not to run. You stay still. You learn it. You breathe with it." "That doesn't work with lava," the other boy said with a frown. "No," Eleanor said, her voice a soft echo. "No, not always." That afternoon, she stayed an extra hour after the bell rang. Ms. Whitfield, the school principal, had asked her to help sort the new donations. Boxes of books, mostly worn paperbacks with frayed edges, cluttered the staff lounge. Eleanor didn't mind. The routine of it, opening, checking, sorting, calmed her. It gave her a sense of usefulness, one that had been eroded over the years like the banks of a slow river. She was halfway through a box labeled Young Adult Fiction when she heard the door open behind her. She turned slowly and saw him, Earl Donovan. Custodian, part-time handyman, heavy boots always too loud on tile. He gave her a crooked smile, the kind that never touched the eyes. "Didn't expect to see you still here, Miss Hayes." Eleanor didn't reply immediately. She watched him as he stepped further into the lounge, pulling on a pair of stained gloves. He opened the utility closet but didn't take out any supplies. He just stood there, staring into the dark space. "I volunteer on Tuesdays," she said finally, turning back to her books. "Sometimes I stay late." "Right," Earl muttered. "Of course. You're the school's little treasure." He pulled a rag from his pocket and began wiping down an already clean counter. "So tell me something, Miss Hayes. How does someone your age keep getting trusted with other people's children? I mean, no offense, but don't they usually phase out the elderly when their memory starts to go?" Eleanor looked up, eyes narrowed. "I don't forget," she said softly. "Not the things that matter." Earl chuckled darkly.
"Right."
"Like faces?" She froze. Just for a second. It was microscopic, but he saw it. His smile twisted. "I've seen you before, you know," he said. "Long before I got this job. Years ago. You were different then. Stronger. Less ghostly." His eyes scanned her face, slow and deliberate. "Do you remember me?" She didn't answer. "I bet you don't." "That makes sense. You probably erased a lot of people." "I would have too." She picked up a book and opened it, though she couldn't read a single word on the page. Her hands were cold. Her breath was shallow. "You know what I always hated?" Earl said, dropping the rag on the table and stepping closer. "How people like you get to walk away. Like nothing happened. Like we're the broken ones just because we never got your second chances." "That's enough," Eleanor said, barely audible. Her throat was tight, her heart hammering. Earl leaned in. "It's not enough. Not even close." The door swung open. Ms. Whitfield stepped in, arms full of PDA flyers. She stopped mid-step, sensing the tension in the room. "Oh," she said. "Eleanor, dear, are you okay?" Eleanor nodded quickly, closing the book and rising to her feet with slow, deliberate care. "Just finishing up," she said. "I should get going." Whitfield glanced at Earl, then back at Eleanor. "Do you need someone to walk you to your car?" "No," Eleanor said, already gathering her things. "Thank you." Outside, the sky had dimmed to that bluish gray that precedes early winter. The wind carried dry leaves in quick spirals across the parking lot. Eleanor walked slowly, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, her mind swimming. Something in Earl's voice, the way he said faces, stirred a memory she had long buried. But she didn't want to go there. Not yet. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of her small apartment, wrapped in a quilt she had made decades ago, watching the wind twist through the streetlights. On her lap was an old, tattered photo album. She hadn't opened it in years. Her fingers hovered over the cover. Then she flipped it open. There he was. A boy with wild eyes and a crooked smile. 15, maybe 16. Hair too long. Always trying to grow a beard before his time. Her son, Daniel. Except he had disappeared. One summer night, after a fight she barely remembered, something about boundaries, about not wanting him to hang out with certain kids, about his obsession with the mountain cats they'd cared for at the rescue center. He'd stormed out. He never came back. They said he'd hitchhiked south. There were rumors. Possible sightings. But nothing confirmed. Eventually, the search faded. And so did his name, though never in her heart. Now she thought of Earl. The way he moved. The eyes. The bitterness. No. It wasn't possible. But what if? She closed the album and pressed it against her chest. Her shoulders trembled, but she made no sound. Outside, the wind howled like a feral thing, restless and wounded. And somewhere far off, fate circled back, preparing to strike. Wednesday arrived with a dull sky and a cold wind that slipped between the school walls like it had a purpose. Eleanor walked into Skyview Elementary with her scarf tight around her neck, her steps slower than usual. The sidewalk still glistened from the night's rain, and a single orange leaf clung stubbornly to her coat as she crossed the lot. Parents waved politely, some offered tight smiles, and a few just stared. She felt it, the growing awareness. Maybe Michelle had spoken louder than she'd realized. Maybe someone else had seen the way Eleanor froze yesterday, the way Earl leaned in too close. Maybe they'd started wondering. She passed through the front office where the receptionist, Janet, offered a cheerful good morning that Eleanor didn't fully return. Her thoughts had weight this morning, heavy and full of shapes she hadn't faced in decades. She stopped at the library door, adjusted her tote, and let herself in. Inside, the air smelled of paper and plastic, comforting and sterile, a temporary escape from the pull of memory. The children wouldn't arrive for another 30 minutes. She liked this quiet time. But it didn't last. Earl's voice came from the hallway, angry, low, too sharp for this early in the morning. "I said it wasn't me. I'm telling you, you've got the wrong guy. Why don't you check the cameras before accusing people?" A second voice, calm and authoritative, belonged to the maintenance supervisor. "Just answer the question, Earl. Why were you in the science lab after hours?" The door was locked and the alarm tripped at 7:42 p.m. Eleanor froze behind the library door, her fingers resting on the edge of a cart filled with returns. Earl's tone dropped further, venom barely contained. "You know what? If you people didn't treat me like I'm disposable, maybe I wouldn't need to defend myself every 5 minutes. Go ahead. Check your damn footage.
The footsteps receded.
Eleanor exhaled, long and controlled. She moved toward the shelves, reshelving books with hands that trembled slightly. Something was building. She felt it in her joints, in the way the hallways felt tighter lately, in the way the students looked out the windows longer than usual, as if expecting something. That afternoon, as the children filed in for reading time, Eleanor noticed a strange unease among them. Even Liam, the chatterbox third grader who usually ran straight to her table with questions about sharks, hovered near the doorway. "Miss Eleanor," he asked, "are we going to do the story about volcanoes again?" "We could," she replied, gently setting down a picture book. "But I think I brought something new today." Liam stepped closer, but glanced toward the window. "My mom said there's weird people in Boulder lately. She said someone let their dog loose in a grocery store. Like, a big dog. Bigger than normal." Eleanor tilted her head. "Was anyone hurt?" "I don't think so. But it wasn't a dog. She said it was wild. My dad told her not to scare me, but she said kids need to know." Eleanor nodded, her voice calm. "It's good to know what's real and what's just fear." Later, as the school emptied again and Eleanor lingered behind, something she rarely did twice in 1 week, she wandered the staff hallway with a strange sense of searching. The door to the science lab was cracked open. That in itself wasn't strange. What was strange was the smell, musky, sharp, like dried fur and metal. She stepped inside. The overhead lights flickered once, then steadied. On one of the tables sat a small animal crate, the kind used for cats or raccoons. Empty. Cleaned recently. But something inside her recoiled. The scent brought her back years. To the rescue center. To metal cages and growls in the dark. She backed away slowly. Earl was connected to this. She didn't know how, but she felt it bone deep. That night, Eleanor sat in her apartment again, the album unopened this time. She paced. She hadn't paced in years. At exactly 11:03 p.m., she opened her laptop, something she used only for emails and school announcements, and typed Earl Donovan arrest record into the search bar. Nothing came up. She tried his name with wildlife and then animal center. Still nothing concrete. But she did find something. An old blog. Post from 2003, archived and barely legible, titled The Forgotten Youth of Fort Collins. Where do they go? One paragraph stood out. One boy, Daniel H., went missing after a domestic dispute with his mother, a well-known biologist working at the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Rescue Center. Despite her public role in the community, the search effort died out within months. The boy was never found. Eleanor stared at the screen. Her hands shook. Her chest felt hollow. The next day was Tuesday. She woke before the alarm and dressed slower than usual. She chose a soft brown sweater and her gray wool coat. As she tied her shoes, her knees protested, but she ignored the pain. She had to see for herself. Had to feel something real before it slipped away again. At school, she was greeted with warm smiles from a few children and nods from teachers who barely remembered her name. Ms. Whitfield approached her with a look of concern. "Eleanor, I meant to ask, did you notice anything strange yesterday? The science lab, perhaps?" Eleanor hesitated, then shook her head. "Only that Earl seems agitated." Whitfield sighed. "We've had reports, but nothing concrete. I've already filed a notice with the district. We're monitoring everything, but I don't want to jump to conclusions." "Of course," Eleanor said, but inside she screamed. At 10:03 a.m., she was shelving books when the fire alarm began blaring. A shriek of chaos. At first, everyone assumed it was a drill. Teachers calmly herded children toward the walls. Eleanor moved to the doorway, peering into the hallway. Then she heard the screaming. Real screaming. Running footsteps. Slamming doors. Panic. She stepped outside just as a breathless fifth grader stumbled past her. "There's a wild animal," he shouted. "In the parking lot. It got out. It's loose." Eleanor froze.
No.
No, it couldn't be. She moved quickly, faster than she had in years, following the direction of the running crowd. Through the window of the east hallway, she saw it. A figure, Earl, yanking open the back of a dirty trailer hitched to a rusted pickup. Inside the trailer, shadows.
Movement.
And then, the Onca leapt out. Majestic.
Terrifying.
Black rosettes across its golden body, muscles coiled like ropes of steel. It landed on the concrete with a low growl that turned into a snarl. Children screamed. Teachers yelled. Eleanor watched as Ms. Whitfield shouted into the PA system from the safety of the office.
Doors slammed.
Blinds were pulled. The animal roamed the parking lot, confused but not immediately aggressive. And Eleanor didn't move. She stepped outside. The wind caught her coat. She stood there, in the middle of the courtyard, alone. The animal turned. Its eyes locked on her. Slowly, it lowered its head, its shoulders rising, body ready. Eleanor dropped her tote bag, raised her hand, and whispered, "Luna." The beast froze, breathing hard, ears twitching, tail swaying. Then, softly, impossibly, it stepped forward, one paw at a time, until it stood just feet from her. The cameras on the school roof recorded everything. A teacher filmed from behind a locked door. Reporters were already en route, helicopters circling. But in that moment, there were no spectators. Just Eleanor. And the wild thing she once loved. "Luna," she said again, her voice breaking. "It's me." The jaguar blinked, then did the unthinkable. It lay down at her feet. The chaos around them faded into stunned silence. Policemen who had arrived moments before stood down. Ms. Whitfield clutched the doorway, weeping. Children watched from windows with wide, tear-filled eyes. Earl was nowhere to be seen. But Eleanor knew. He was watching. Somewhere close. She looked down at the animal resting by her feet, and everything in her past came rushing forward like a river finally breaking its dam. The cameras didn't blink. Neither did the jaguar. And for 37 seconds, measured later in newsrooms and police reports, the entire school froze in breathless disbelief as an elderly woman stood in the center of a courtyard with a deadly predator curled at her feet like an obedient house cat. The moment shattered the nation's expectation of what a hero looks like. By the time the tranquilizer team arrived, Eleanor had already knelt beside the animal, resting her trembling hand atop Luna's broad head. The Onca didn't flinch. She breathed deeply, chest rising and falling with the rhythm of memory, muscle, and recognition. The news went viral before noon. Helicopters circled the school, news vans jammed the streets, and Eleanor's name, misspelled at first, then corrected, flashed across television tickers as the brave volunteer of Boulder. But Eleanor Hayes didn't feel brave. She sat in the nurse's office, silent, her coat draped over her lap, staring blankly at the floor as Principal Karen Whitfield stood nearby on the phone with the police. "Yes, she's unharmed," Karen said. "Yes, she knew the animal. Yes, she's safe. No, we're still trying to locate Earl Donovan." She hung up with a hand that trembled and turned to Eleanor. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Her mind was a kaleidoscope of sounds, snarls in the dark, Daniel's laughter when he was small, the weight of a clipboard in her hand at the rescue center, the smell of antiseptic and blood after a tranquilizer shot gone wrong. "Eleanor," Karen tried again, more gently now. "That animal, she knew you."
I saw it.
Everyone saw it. "Who is she?" Eleanor's voice came out slow, cracked, like something peeled from an old diary. "Her name is Luna. She was brought into the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Rescue Center in 2002. Found near Glenwood Springs. Her mother was swept away by the river. I raised her. For almost 2 years." Karen sank into a chair. "Jesus. And Donovan, did he take her from the center?" Eleanor's eyes narrowed.
No.
"She was transferred years ago to a private sanctuary. I don't know how he found her. I didn't even know she was alive." The school fell under lockdown protocol for 2 hours. Police combed the parking lot. Local wildlife officers loaded Luna into a transport crate after she was sedated, and news helicopters swarmed the sky like vultures above a battlefield. But Eleanor didn't leave. She refused an ambulance. Refused to go home. She simply sat, as if moving would unravel something. That evening, back in her apartment, she sat at her small kitchen table with a hot cup of tea untouched before her. The news played softly on her old television. No fatalities reported, thanks to Eleanor Hayes, a volunteer at Skyview Elementary. Experts say the animal showed unusual submissiveness. The suspect, Earl Donovan, remains at large. She muted the volume and leaned forward, staring at her reflection in the black screen. For the first time in years, she saw not a quiet old woman with a good heart and gentle hands, but a mother who had once lost everything and buried that loss beneath decades of stillness. A knock came at the door. 3 firm raps. She startled, stood slowly, her joints stiff from the cold. Through the peephole, she saw 2 officers. One older, one young. She opened the door cautiously. "Ms. Hayes," the elder officer said, removing his cap. "We have him."
Donovan.
He was found in a vacant lot a mile from the school. No resistance. Just sitting there. Eleanor gripped the doorframe. And Luna? Being transferred to a wildlife facility near Estes Park. "She'll be okay." "Where is he now?" she asked. The officer hesitated. "In holding. He asked for you." Eleanor's heart paused. "Me?" he said. "Tell her I waited long enough." The officers left. She stood in the doorway long after they were gone. The next morning, the police station was surrounded by reporters, but they didn't recognize her in her thick gray scarf and dark sunglasses. She moved quietly, as always. She didn't speak until she was behind the glass window of the interview room. Earl sat in the chair, handcuffed, his face drawn but not defeated. There was no guard inside. Just the 2 of them. The door shut behind her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Earl smirked. "Took you long enough." Eleanor's mouth was dry. "You could have gotten those children killed."
"But I didn't," he replied.
"You were always good at survival. You passed it on. Even to her." "Why, Earl?" she asked. Her voice cracked again. "Why do this? What do you want from me?" He leaned forward, eyes dark. "I want you to look at me."
She did.
Slowly. "Take a good look," he said. "You don't see it yet?" Eleanor stared. At the jawline. The scar on his chin. The curl of his lip when he smiled bitterly. And something in her stomach turned to ice. "No," she whispered. "No, it can't be." "Say it," he said. "You know it. Say my name." "Daniel," she choked out. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the back of the chair. "Daniel, 22 years," he said. "You left me. You ran away," she said. "You disappeared. You didn't come after me." His voice cracked through the room like thunder. "You waited a few weeks, filed a report, and let me vanish. You picked your animals over me." "That's not true," she gasped. "I searched. I put up posters. I talked to police. And then you went back to your jaguars. You mourned me like I was a cat that couldn't be saved. A footnote in your life." "I never stopped looking for you," she said, eyes filling. "I didn't know where you were, Daniel. I didn't know. Don't call me that." His fists clenched. "You lost that right when you chose Luna over me." Eleanor's breath caught. She was dying. You know she was sick. She needed me. "I needed you." He leaned forward. "But I wasn't majestic enough, was I? Not as beautiful. Not as easy to explain. You were my son." Her voice broke fully now. "And I failed you." Silence stretched between them. He looked away, jaw tight. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come here? Why bring her?" "Because I wanted you to see what you left behind. I found her 6 months ago. At that private sanctuary. Stolen.
Trained.
Abused. She remembered your name, you know. That's how I knew. She remembered you." Eleanor wept silently, hands shaking. "You brought her here to punish me?" "No," he said softer now. "To make you remember." She approached the glass, slowly. "You were a good boy. You loved the animals. You used to sit by Luna's cage for hours. You had a gift, Daniel. But I didn't know how to be your mother. I thought love was enough." He swallowed hard. "You didn't come find me." "I didn't know how," she said. "I thought you hated me. I thought you wanted to disappear.
I did, he admitted.
But I never stopped wanting to be found.
The room was too quiet now.
Eleanor placed a hand on the glass. You found me.
Too late, he whispered.
Maybe not, she said. Maybe now is the time. He looked up, eyes glassy. The guard returned. Time was up. Eleanor turned to leave. I'm not going to vanish again, she said softly. You're not a ghost, Daniel.
He didn't respond.
But he didn't look away. That afternoon, the press begged her for interviews. She refused them all. Instead, she walked quietly into the wildlife facility in Estes Park. Luna was recovering in a large enclosure, surrounded by trees and calm. Eleanor stood at the gate, and Luna rose, ears twitching. For a moment, neither moved. Then Eleanor whispered, You brought him back to me, didn't you? The animal blinked slowly and laid back down, as if to say, Finally, it's done. Eleanor stood there until the sun dipped behind the mountains, letting grief and memory settle on her shoulders like an old, familiar weight. She had faced the wild, but the wilderness had always been inside her. The days that followed were strangely quiet. The world had moved on faster than Eleanor expected. News cycles shifted. The headlines that once bore her name and Luna's image were now filled with other chaos, other heroes, other tragedies. The school reopened within a week, the courtyard repainted, the incident folded into memory like a chapter too strange to retell without disbelief. Yet for Eleanor, everything had cracked open. She sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by the stillness she once cherished and now felt only hollow. The window overlooked the foothills of the Rockies, and each morning she watched the sky for signs that something might shift again. But the sky remained indifferent. She hadn't visited the school again. Ms. Whitfield had called once, warm and concerned, offering her gratitude and a space to speak if she needed, but Eleanor knew she couldn't step back into that building, not yet. The library, the children, the whispers in the hallways, all of it now felt like echoes of a self she'd been pretending to be. She had faced something ancient in the courtyard that day. Not the jaguar. Herself. Her past. Her son. Daniel. No. Earl, as he called himself now. A name built from years she didn't witness, from pain she couldn't imagine. She had failed him, and no amount of good she'd done since could erase that. Still, she couldn't let it end there. On Thursday, she boarded a regional bus and traveled 2 hours north to the county detention facility. No reporters followed this time. No camera crews. Just her and the long road, the wind pushing against the windows like an old friend who'd grown impatient. The officer at the front desk recognized her from the news, but said nothing. She was led back into a visitation room with thick glass, a metal phone, and a chair that creaked under her weight. She waited. Daniel entered wearing the same blank expression he'd worn as a boy when caught doing something reckless, climbing fences, teasing the younger interns, sneaking into the nocturnal enclosures to watch the cats sleep. He sat down without meeting her eyes. You didn't have to come again, he said. She picked up the phone. I did. He hesitated before lifting his. Why? Because I can't lose you again, she said. And because I don't want the last thing you remember about me to be silence. He studied her face for a long time. You don't get to just apologize and undo 20 years. I'm not trying to undo anything, she replied. I know I can't. I made choices. I lived with them. But I never stopped loving you. Then why didn't you find me? Because I was ashamed, she said. Because I thought I'd ruined everything, and that you'd be better off without me. I convinced myself you'd start it over. I thought if I kept saving animals, maybe I'd redeem myself. You picked cats over your son, he said bitterly. I picked survival over collapse, she said. I picked what I knew how to heal. But you were the wound I never learned to close. He sat in silence. The phone between them crackled faintly. You know, he said eventually, when I was 14, I wanted to be just like you. I thought you were invincible. You'd walk into cages like you were talking to old friends. You made animals trust you. But I lost your trust, she said. That's the only one that mattered. I hated you, he admitted. For years. I blamed you for everything.
The shelters. The cold nights. The things I did to survive.
She swallowed hard.
I'm so sorry, Daniel. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said. Not yet. That's okay, she said, voice steady. I didn't come for forgiveness. I came because I'm still your mother, whether you want me to be or not. His eyes glistened, just faintly, but he didn't cry. Not yet. She reached into her coat pocket and unfolded a photograph, pressing it against a glass. A snapshot from the summer he turned 11. Daniel holding Luna as a cub, both of them looking wild and untamed.
He stared at it for a long time.
I remember this day, he said. She wouldn't stop licking my face. You were the only one she trusted besides me, Eleanor said. She used to cry when you weren't there. He leaned back, letting the memory settle. Is she okay? Yes, Eleanor said. She's safe now. They're building a new enclosure for her. She remembers you. I don't know what I was trying to prove, he said after a long pause. I thought maybe if I brought her back to you, you'd see the damage. You'd feel what I felt.
I did, she said.
The second I saw her, I felt it all. Another silence. But this time not hostile, just full of weight. What happens to me now? He asked. They're charging you with animal endangerment, trespassing, and a dozen other things, she said. But no one was hurt. Luna didn't attack. The school is pushing for leniency. There's a chance if you cooperate, if you show remorse. I'm tired of being angry, he said quietly. It's all I've known for years. It eats everything. Then let's try something else, she said. Let's try remembering who you were before that. He looked at her like a boy again, just for a second. Like he was 13 and confused and desperate to be seen. Do you think there's anything left of him? I do, she said. I've seen it. In the way you talked to Luna. In the fact that you didn't hurt anyone. In the fact that you waited. He didn't respond, but his silence was no longer sharp. It was tired. Open. A door cracked. When the visit ended, she stood and pressed her hand against the glass. He didn't mirror it, but he didn't turn away. That was enough. Outside, the air smelled of frost and pine. She walked slowly to the bus stop, letting the cold bite her cheeks, letting the past bleed out of her lungs with each exhale. That night, she began writing. Not a letter. A record. Of everything. Her life at the center. Her love for Daniel. Her guilt. Her failure. Her hope. It poured out of her like rain through old gutters, unstoppable and messy. She wrote until dawn. At sunrise, she mailed the pages to the facility. She didn't know if he'd read them.
But they were his now.
Just like the memories. Just like her love. As the sun crept over the mountains, casting long shadows across the quiet town, Eleanor stood by her window and whispered to the glass, I'm still here. The glass didn't answer. But somewhere in the distance something shifted.
Soft. Subtle.
Like the first movement of a heart learning how to beat again. Spring came late that year, creeping gently into Boulder with soft rains and shy blossoms. The world moved on. The children returned to their routines, the library reopened, and Eleanor Hayes became something between legend and neighbor, a story whispered in staff rooms and classrooms, remembered in the way people remember the day they almost lost something precious and didn't. But Eleanor no longer visited the school. She spent most mornings walking to the wildlife facility near Estes Park, where Luna now lived in a spacious enclosure at the edge of a pine grove. The Onkapintata had grown slower, more cautious, but when Eleanor arrived, she always stirred. There was a rhythm between them, silent and ancient. Eleanor would sit near the enclosure for hours, knitting or reading, sometimes speaking softly, though not to the animal. The stories were for someone else now. Across town, Daniel remained in a rehabilitation program overseen by the court. He had been granted leniency, a miracle by some accounts, but not without conditions. Therapy. Supervised work. No contact with wildlife. Eleanor visited him every other week. The first few times were stiff. They talked about safe things.
Books. Food.
The weather. But gradually, the ice between them thinned.
He started writing letters in return, sometimes only a few lines, sometimes pages. In one, he wrote, "I didn't know people could change when they're already broken. I think maybe I'm not as shattered as I thought." Eleanor kept that letter folded in her coat pocket, worn at the edges from being touched too often. On a crisp morning in April, she arrived for their visit and found him sitting in the courtyard of the facility, tending to a small vegetable garden the residents had built. He looked up as she approached and offered a real smile. Small, unsure, but real. "I saved a spot for you," he said, pointing to the patch of soil beside him. She sat. They worked in silence for a while, fingers deep in earth, the sun warming their shoulders. At one point, he glanced over and said, "I dreamed of her last night."
Luna.
She was running, but not from anything. Just running. Eleanor smiled. She used to do that when the sun hit the grass just right. "You remember everything," he said. "Not everything," she replied. "But I remember what matters now." He looked at her for a long time. "I think I want to work with kids someday. Ones like me. Ones who got lost." She felt something loosen in her chest, a breath she hadn't released in years. "You'd be good at that." "Maybe," he said. "I think I still have time." That summer, Eleanor returned to Skyview Elementary. Not as a volunteer, just a visitor. Ms. Whitfield embraced her tightly, and the children greeted her like a returning monarch. She sat in the library again, surrounded by curious faces, and read them a story. It wasn't about animals or heroes. It was about forgiveness, and how sometimes it arrives slowly, like rain in the desert, but when it comes, it changes everything. As she read, her voice never trembled. Her hands were steady, and in one of the back rows, a teacher in training observed quietly, a man with a gentle posture and thoughtful eyes. When the reading ended, the children clapped, and Eleanor looked toward the back, offering the faintest nod. Daniel nodded back. Not a secret, not a ghost, just a man beginning again. Months passed. Luna grew older, and so did Eleanor. But something inside her felt younger, as if grief had finally loosened its grip. One evening, she stood by the enclosure at dusk, the sky bruised with pink and orange, and watched the Onca-Pintata breathe slow and deep beneath the trees. "We found our way, didn't we?" she whispered. The animal blinked, unmoving. But there was peace there. And for the first time in her life, Eleanor didn't feel like she was waiting for something to return. She had already found it. It had always been love. Quiet, imperfect, surviving through silence and storm. Thank you for listening to this story all the way to the end. I wonder, where are you listening from right now?